I'd like to welcome first Tyler McCann and Frank Elias up to the stage, and will lead us through policy discussions, some group interaction. I said last night, we're solving drainage in Manitoba today, so let's put our heads together as producers. As we all know, we are fixers, and we can come up with some great solutions to help out the government and our elected officials on making sure that we've got some great decisions to I guess, make and lead drainage for 2026 and onwards. So welcome.
Thank you, Jill. And good to know that we've got an ambitious kind of objective for the afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tyler McCann. I'm the Managing Director at the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. We are a national agriculture and food think tank, spend a lot of time talking about policy issues at kind of the big 45,000-foot geopolitical issue, but also kind of on the issues that matter to farmers spread across the country. And some context that's, I think, gives me an interesting background for this discussion is that my wife and I farm in Western Quebec. And for us, drainage is not a big deal. I don't think that there's many farms at home that don't have some tile drain on them somewhere, but I'm learning that that's not necessarily the case here. So before we get Frank to introduce himself, I'd like to do a bit of a show of hands. Who here's got tile drainage on their farm? Who here doesn't have tile drainage but would like to have tile drainage? And who here's run into kind of permitting or licensing issues trying to get tile drainage on their farm? Okay, so we've got some people that hopefully have some scars here that will help fill the discussion. But we're going to spend about 15 minutes talking at the beginning to try and do a bit of a level setting around drainage, what it looks like, some of the issues that you may run into, some of the solutions that are out there. Then it'll be up to you to talk for about half an hour, talk at your tables around what this looks like, and then we'll come back together as a group to talk about kind of where this goes and where KAP could go next. Frank, why don't you take a minute and tell the room a little bit about yourself and the business and your history to start things off.
Sure. Thanks for this opportunity to be here. My name is Frank Elias from Winkler, Manitoba. What Jill said is that we're going to solve all the drainage problems here. That's probably the best thing I've heard said all year. Let's do that. And on another note, you guys are maybe lucky that there's this bright light shining at me, because when you asked that second question, I tried to pick out who had their hands up that wanted tile drainage, and I wish I could have written down your names and number, but anyway, so my name's Frank Elias. My history or my background is I've been a potato farmer most of my life. For 20 years I managed Quaker Farms, and it was in that time that I learned the benefits of tile drainage and everything it could do for us. And then a position opened up at Precision Land Solutions where they needed a leader, and so I became the CEO there, and it was an easy transition because at Quakers we put potatoes in the ground, and at PLS we put plastic in the ground, and it was something that had transformed my life, so it was easy to do. That's my background.
And so let's talk a little bit about what you do now at Precision Land Solutions. So what kind of is the work that you do around drainage? Because it's more than just putting tile in the ground, right? And so talk a little bit about that, and then kind of what the farmers you work with, what benefits you expect them to see from the drainage that they do put in.
Okay, so in our organization we do, we try to solve drainage problems in general, both surface drainage and subsurface, both of them. And our goal is to provide the solutions from the beginning to the end. So we help with permitting, with licensing, with downstream consents, and then survey, design, and we end with the installation. So kind of the whole package. Was there a second question?
What benefits do farmers that you work with expect to see when they put drainage in?
Well, if I speak personally, from my own experience, you can sleep at night when it rains 3 inches. That's probably the biggest benefit. I noticed that on the farm, when you have the big heavy rains, this helps for sure. But the The biggest benefit is when you have that next quarter-inch rain or the next one kind of 3 or 4 days in a row. That's often when our crops would drown out. And wherever we had tile drainage, that problem kind of went away because the ground now becomes an empty sponge that can absorb the water. So yeah, less drowned out spots for sure. More even crops across the farm, less salinity, deeper root growth. I think one of the things we noticed on the farm is that over time, the tile drainage worked a little better over time, but more than that, the soil just got healthier because more and more roots growing deeper in the ground. So, and we all know what that does. That's just good for the soil health.
One of the things that we talked about, though, was that you obviously have something that you're selling. So what do you do, though, to try and kind of put your money where your mouth is, or to help kind of show farmers what this looks like in reality, so it's not just them trying to take your word for it?
One of the things that we've done is, one of the struggles here in Manitoba, and it seems unique to Manitoba, is that producers here feel like tile or subsurface drainage does not work in clay soils. And it's something that, a myth that we hear almost every day, it seems, but not in the rest of the world. So the rest of the world, actually, clay is often the first land that gets tiled. Here in Manitoba, it's seen as it might not work. So one of the things we did to overcome that is we found a field on Highway 75 right near Glenlee. It's Osborne clay, and a heavy clay that was always saturated, and we offered to tile it, and we just tiled it for free. One of the things it was a 15-acre field, and we just knew that the benefits would show themselves, and so we've done that a couple of years ago, and now we're installing monitoring equipment, and we hope to share that with producers and show what we can do there. We've also worked with U of M, done their plots behind the university, and they also have some plots in Arborg that we've worked with. So we try to show it that way.
And so I asked the room how many producers had run into problems with permitting and licensing. Some hands went up. What are some of those problems that people run into, Frank, when they're putting drainage in?
Okay, here I have to be a little bit careful that I don't get too passionate, and hopefully the right people the right people aren't in the room, or that I don't say anything offensive. But there's a lot of issues when it comes to permitting. I think permitting is a good thing. I think we need regulations, but there are definitely some problems. So when I think about it, I kind of categorize them into 3 different pillars. One is that we have outdated policies based on outdated science. One of the examples is you can't tile Class 6 soils, even though you may have been farming it for 20, 30, or 40 years already. You're not allowed to tile it because the original land classification, when they developed those in the 60s, they used the words the land is not, I think the exact wording is it's unimprovable. And that was developed to help producers know what kind of land they're buying, and somehow we changed it to say it's not, instead of it's not feasible, or the government uses that to say it's not even possible and it shouldn't be. So with technology changes, equipment changing, farming practices changing, there's no reason that on most of that land that we shouldn't be able to tile it, because it is improvable.
And then what about wetlands? So wetland loss is something that's come up over the last couple of years. The government changed rules about 5 years ago. How is that impacting what can be tiled and what restrictions farmers might face?
Yeah, so we have a no net loss policy, no net loss of wetlands policy in Manitoba, which means that exactly that we don't want to lose a single acre. From my experience, what that has done, and I think wetlands are good, and we definitely need them, and we should preserve them. That no net loss policy is about a number and not about quality. So we have, there's a lot of areas that are deemed wetlands, and that we're trying to preserve, and what we're doing is ruining the land around it. You end up with more and more acres or square feet of wetland, but they're losing in functionality. They're becoming sour, and we have upward movement of water, so salinity is growing along the edges. And then when you have nothing's growing along the edges, you have more leaching, more wasted fertilizer, more surface erosion, all those kinds of things. So I think we should figure out how to manage our wetlands, and it should be a quality policy, not just about the numbers.
And what does the permitting process look like at the, what does the permitting process look like, and what's the role of the provincial government? What's the role of the municipal government, and what's the role of the neighbor and the other landowners in the area and all of them?
So first of all, the license comes from the province, from water stewardship. They're the kind of overarching authority on it, but they will often revert to the local municipality, and they won't permit until the local municipality has also given their approval. So our process is generally we go to the RMs first, present the designs and the plan, and sometimes hydrological studies and those kinds of things. We get approval from the RM, and then we submit that approval along with our license application to the province. And then they decide what to do with it from there.
And what's the role of the neighbors and other landowners in that?
Oh yeah, I missed that. So part of the licensing process is we have to get downstream consent, and officially from a province, it's just the immediate downstream person. So the first landowner next to you has to give a signed consent. Many of the RMs have implemented their own policy, and often kind of seems arbitrarily, but some of them require three downstream consents. One RM goes up to 3 miles. That one's almost impossible to tile in, because how do you get 3 miles worth of people to consent to something and they don't even know what's going on? Yeah.
And you talked about how kind of permitting and regulations aren't necessarily a bad thing, that you kind of support that idea, but what are the problems that you're running into that make it an issue? Why is this not smooth sailing across the province when somebody wants to put tile drain in the ground?
Yeah, so back to the outdated science. Some of the other problems we have is this idea that drainage is negative to our environment, or negative to in general, and I'm not sure what that's based on. Old thinking maybe, that kind of thing, because there's lots of proven science that shows that tile drainage, you can reduce nitrous oxide drastically, so we'd have less greenhouse gases, reduces surface erosion by sometimes over 50%, so we have way less phosphorus in our lakes. Some of these kind of things are let me think of it. The mandate from the minister is good. It supports drainage, but our enforcement and our officers and the staff that work with it, they seem to have their own agenda, and there's no accountability. Oh, now I'm starting to rant a little bit, so I got to be careful.
Well, and so let's before we'll put some questions up and encourage people to talk about it at the table. When you think about how we fix these issues, right? Again, your solution isn't let's make it a free-for-all for tile drainage. What are some of the things that you've been trying to get government to do to make things work better?
So I've met with the minister at least a couple of times in my career and asked them exactly this. Can we enforce the rules in a more consistent way, so that it's not just interpretation of whoever your local officer is? Let's be more consistent, and let's be more science-based. And I can give you some examples. One example is we had 2 contractors applying for a permit on the same field. It happened over the course of 2 years. One application was denied completely, and the producer was requested to do a pedology report and look at the soil classifications. What was interesting, he didn't know about it, but the other permit had already been issued. So not only do two different farmers apply for the same thing, have different answers. One producer applying for the same permit on the same piece of land had different answers. So it's really frustrating, and it's just not consistent. So it's hard for us as a contractor to give advice on what to do and what can be permitted when you really don't know, because there's too much ambiguity.
And when I think across kind of almost every regulatory issue out there, there's this ongoing challenge, right? Where it's one thing to have the right regulations on paper, it's one thing to have the right legislation written into law, but at the end of the day, this always becomes a question of how is it going to be enforced and who's going to do that work. And the problem that we run into is that people are people. We make different decisions for different reasons, and it can be hard. And I started my career as a political staffer, and it's not the job of political staffers to tell regulators or enforcement officers to do it, but boy, trying to find that right culture, that right space so the right decisions can get made is tough. And I think ultimately what we want to do is now give some time for you all to talk amongst yourselves about this, and we're going to come back and kind of wrap things up at the end. But you've seen some of these questions are out on your table. We've kind of tried to break them into kind of 4 big questions. I think it's worth starting with what's your experience with drainage. Again, I think there's a lot more kind of variability around experience with drainage, so it's good to make sure everybody understands how you're approaching it. If you have run into problems, what are some of those problems that are there? What do you see as solutions? And then when we think about what KAP should be doing on this for the future, if you had to pick a drainage priority or something that you think KAP should be doing, what is that? And so what we want to do is give you about 30 minutes to talk about this with your tables. Again, if you're in a small group, a small table, please feel free to join another bigger table. And then we'll come back and we will ask if someone at the table could take some notes on the papers that are on your table with the questions on them. We'll be collecting these after, and we'll be able to use them. And we'll have a group discussion at the end. We've got a question here.
I just wondered if you'd touch on the no net loss clause. Now, under current regulations, you can mitigate that by a 3-to-1. If you want to get rid of an acre in the middle of a wetland in the middle of the field, you create a 3-acre wetland in a different location. And so I just wanted to make the crowd aware of that.
And so the question is basically, how do you deal with the no net loss rule today? Because it isn't actually no net loss. You can change a wetland if you do. I think you've got 3 options for mitigation at the end of the day, right? So what are the options when you need to impact a wetland?
Yeah, there's a few options. So they call it purchase, perform, forget the third slogan, but you can build your own wetland or find a wetland, 3-to-1, exactly like you're describing. And then you're supposed to hand it off to the Department of Heritage. The problem with that is that when you try to do that, it doesn't work. The Department of Heritage, although it's legislated that they have to manage these wetlands that we create, they have no budget or funds to do it, so they won't accept it. So we have a number of producers that want to do that, and they just actually can't do it. So that's the one issue where I talk about kind of the administration is kind of a bit chaotic. The other thing that does work is you can simply buy it. And they've set the dollars at, Megan, do you know what the number is?
6,000 an acre.
6,000 an acre. And 2-to-1. So you can do that. You can purchase it for 6,000 an acre, and then you have to do 2 acres to 1 to do that. That is possible. That money is supposed to go to help manage and refresh and recuperate wetlands somewhere else. I don't know where it goes.
So I had to double check this. It's pay, perform, or purchase are your 3 Ps for dealing with the no net loss policy.
The perform doesn't work.
Any other questions from the floor before we get into? We got another question here.
Well, I wonder if you'd touch on Glenley, sorry, about, we had a neighbor that had tile every 50 feet, and it was heavy clay, and the guy came back, this is years ago, and put a tile in every 25 feet. So you'd never mentioned anything about Glenlee, what spacing and whether it was, did you get any water to run out of those the tile you'd put in?
Yeah, the spacing we have there is 30 and 35, and we did just 2 parts of the field just to see if there was a difference. In general, in Manitoba on the heavy ground, we are tiling at 35 feet. We haven't really done much tighter than that. As far as water running, yes there is, and I could show you some data, but it's actually quite surprising. Within 28 hours after a rain, our pump starts to go. So it's pretty quick that it's infiltrating into the tile.
And so maybe what we'll do is we'll give you the chance now as tables to talk about it. We'll ask Frank to go around and he can answer some questions that your table has too. And then we'll reconvene in about half an hour to wrap things up. All right, we are going to start a bit of a group discussion now. Hopefully everybody's tables have had a good chance to discuss some of these things. Hopefully you've taken some notes. Again, if you have notes, we'll take them up at the end. We'll try and cover the 4 questions. Maybe spending a bit more time on questions 2, 3, and 4 than on question number 1. But does somebody have some experience with drainage that they'd like to share with the group? Either a good news story or a bad news story with some problems that they've run into? Some people put their hands up earlier that had some problems. Anybody want to share some of that experience? Is that because the problem were neighbors next door that didn't want to approve your drainage? Well, Jill's going to volunteer.
So I guess over the process of the last probably 10 years, we've probably installed close to 700 acres of tile now, with a strategic plan to probably do at least another 2,000. We've run into the situation where it's the land classification that's hung us up. We're in an area south of Portage where we've got wet sand. Well, I've got a solution for wet sand, but it's really tied our hands in our ability to continue and really, I think, go across the line as far as making some real improvements to that land. Specifically, and it's a historic problem where we have the 240 highway that goes straight south of Portage, basically changed the landscape by putting it through there, and land that typically was pasture that was, back in the 60s, not farmable, through the advent of that highway going through change in equipment and technologies. Producers in that area are farming that land. There's potatoes north of there, right by that Croakers have actually. So it is a way to make those improvements, but I think goes to the root of that one situation and ideal that was brought up. Frank brought up about the wetland policy and what it really means, and it's too easy to just draw a box, and if it doesn't fit in that box, then the individuals that are doing the regulating or the registration, it's outside of the guidelines, so it's an automatic no. So, or an immense cost to the producer to buy it out or to mitigate it.
How many people know that they're farming land that is in that soil classification that says it's unapprovable land? Or that's not actually what's the actual name? Unapproved? Yeah. So how many people know that they're farming land in that soil type? How many people know all of the classifications of the land that they're farming? I guess that means probably some that don't. Yep.
You're referring to I go by the crop insurance rating, A, B, C, D.
No, this is a soil. Okay, Jill, do you want to?
This is your actual soil classification, and so that's one thing that I've asked a few producers too. Like when you go to buy land, and you drive by and you know that the farmer before has had some drainage problems or some potholes, and you think in your head, well, that's easy. We can apply for some drainage and do some changes, maybe apply for tile drainage. But I think the next step is that part of the process and actually getting the map so you know what you're buying. Because I have known of producers that actually buy land and then find out after the fact that your hands are tied and you can't do anything to improve it.
And this is a different problem, right, than kind of the enforcement inconsistency that you talk about, right? That this is you are not allowed on land that's classified this way. Do you want to just talk, Frank? Because part of what you see there is kind of we need modern science to update the soil classification system, right?
Yeah, just the problem is only basically with the class 6 soils, which are deemed not feasible for improvement. That's the exact word. They're not feasible for improvement, and we all know it's not true because a lot of them have been improved, and so it's just old wording and used. They were developed to help producers buying land who maybe were far away or didn't quite know. That's why they were developed, those land capabilities, to help us buy land. And now someone turned those words around and changed it to they can't be improved, like they're not allowed to. It doesn't make sense.
Not only that, but we're also required to buffer the class 6 soil by 50 meters.
So you can't go right up to the edge of you've got a 50-meter buffer that you can't tile.
Beyond it.
So how many people think that they know whether or not they're 50 meters within class 6 soil? So one of the things that we talked about was kind of the need for more education. How do we work with people that are actually making these decisions? How do you deal with the people that are interpreting the rules so that they've got kind of a common understanding? I think there's an opportunity there to educate, but I wonder how much of it is we need to make sure that farmers have a better understanding of this as well, so that people understand kind of where that class 6 is and what the rules are around it. Does that make sense? Do we need to kind of look at how do we do a better job of that? Does anybody have other problems that they've run into with tile drainage that they want to talk about? Come over here.
This isn't specific to tile drainage, just drainage in general, but my area under the Canada Land Inventory Classification System is all reconnaissance data, which essentially is a guesstimate. It's not a detailed soil survey. I do believe that the federal government has put some funds aside to expand the detailed soil survey in certain parts of Manitoba. I just don't know where they're at in that regard. But essentially, we're working on guesstimates of what the soil classifications might be, and there's barriers with that.
Yeah, just to share a little experience sitting on a conservation district. You know, the word drainage is always kind of a dirty word, and that's unfortunate when you're a producer because drainage is important. So I'm not sure if we should be talking drainage management or label it different. But anyways, the big thing was we had to explain to some of the non-farmers in the group that, you know, the best use of water is a healthy crop. It can use a lot of water, and it can digest it and produce a lot of crop. And if you don't have the mechanisms in place and it compounds downstream, it actually makes the problem worse. So the few farmers that were on the board tried our best to educate the rest of the board that this was actually a very positive thing and going to add to the drainage or the flooding issue is actually going to minimize it or help improve it. So I think going forward, whether it's municipal or conservation, education is huge on trying to sway people who just think drainage is a dirty word.
We had another conversation on our table, and I think it's common around the province, is what is the actual definition of a class 1 and a class 3 wetlands? It seems that different areas of the province, you'll get a different answer as to what actually constitute this wetlands. We had a discussion about, is there a need for a training, on the resource officer side or who you're getting that permit through about what these wetlands actually are, because they can be mislabeled, and then that can drastically affect your ability to even drain it or not.
Frank, do you run into that with different interpretations around wetlands?
Yeah, we have a lot of that. So, first of all, we have to, as a contractor, or you as a producer, have to decide what's a wetland on your own. And when you design for a permit, you've got to try to figure out what's a wetland, design around it, buffer around it, and then, and only then will the officers will look at that and decide if they like it, or if they want to re-inspect and change what you thought. They won't give you a map, first of all, what's a wetland. You got to do it, and then they'll come and usually change it and make it a little bigger, or those kinds of problems. And so we often have discrepancies on what's a wetland and what's not. If you look at the guideline between Class 2 and Class 3, there's almost no, I don't think anyone knows how to interpret what's the difference between Class 2 and Class 3, and yet there's a huge difference in what you can do with it. It's a problem.
So did some of the tables get into how do we fix this? What do people think that the right solutions are? And again, maybe we're going to come back here because you talked about kind of the work that you've done on your conservation district, trying to talk to people about it. How much of that is just explaining to people what they are? Did you do other things? Did you see an impact at the end of the day with that work?
Well, in the end, the conservation board has approved every application I think that has happened in the RM, but so they didn't put much of a roadblock in, but there was that resistance. That was the biggest problem, and I don't believe our RM has. I think they've kind of, if the conservation district thought it was good, then the RM kind of followed suit. So that's about all I could kind of share with that.
Other thoughts, ideas about solutions? How do we fix these problems? Delaney?
Thanks. I'll just share a few of the things that went around the table here. Number one, more resources or boots on the ground, multiple experiences of like 2 to 4 years of applications being put in and still not responded to. That is a really long time. Improving the application portal experience. Apparently it's not super user-friendly, so that might be something that's helpful. I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong words. I'm definitely a note taker here. Cleaning the provincial drains to ensure that like the major infrastructure is supported, and then maybe the projects that are being asked for don't need to be asked for as urgent. And then also there was reference to wetlands, that there's a greater maybe occurrence or an increasing occurrence of wetlands beside roadways, and maybe easing roadblocks on drainage or management of those wetlands might also help in terms of road management, road safety, and some of the issues that are looking to be resolved.
Frank, did you want to comment on that in particular? I'm curious about the municipal infrastructure piece, because again, I think that this idea that farmers moving water into municipal ditches doesn't go over well, and there's a perception that tile drainage makes or is harder on municipal infrastructure. What's your experience with that?
In general, I want to say that working with the RMs is pretty good. We don't run into a whole lot of kind of illogical or hiccups with the RMs. There's a lot of RMs that just don't have good drainage, and there are no ditches. So that's probably the bigger problem. Not so much their policies. The only policy concern that we run into often with RMs is when, well, there's two, I guess. The downstream consent. Certain RMs seem to not want to deal with tough people or something. I don't know. So they just say no until everybody says yes. That's one of the problems. The other issue we have with RMs is and it's not theirs. It's the water stewardship. The RM will say, we'll license this project once the authority has given approval. In other words, once the province given approval, because they're the experts. The water stewardship says we only approve once the RM says yes. So we have a couple, 2 or 3 right now, where it's just back and forth. No one says yes, and it's been years.
So the last question was, if you had one priority for KAP, what would it be? Anybody have any answers to that, or a suggestion for what the priority should be?
That's your problem.
I live, or our farm is right next to a provincial drain, and we've got another one about 2 miles west of us. But the province decided that they were going to upgrade, redesign the drain, and that was probably, they did that about eight years ago. And the problem we have right now is they haven't finished it. The outlet hasn't been touched, and there's another spot over the pipeline where they haven't touched it, and they have 2 bottlenecks. So they spent all this money to accomplish nothing. And it just boggles my mind that you can't get some way to move on this stuff.
And the third order drains, angle drains coming through the RM, and 1 mile where in the bridge, by the bridge on Audubon Road, the ditch is right full of water, and a mile north, 6-foot culvert has 1 foot of water in the bottom. And it's just cattails is the difference.
And again, so that comes to RMs thinking more about drainage and their role in it and how they go about it. That's the province. You're talking about the provinces. Province is taking it. Other solutions? We've got, come over here and then we'll take one more after this.
Well, first of all, you have to start with a viable drainage plan. It's okay to tile drainage, but where's your discharge water going to go to? Like, you know, that's, everybody would like to blame the RM, but the RM's business is to build the roads, not to take your water away. And then you should talk to your neighbors. You know, try to get them on board, and if possible, try, if they want to do some drainage, try to get them involved in their drainage project too.
And Frank, you mentioned that is part of the work that you guys do, right? Is that kind of outreach to make sure that there is buy-in from the neighbors and others?
Yeah, he's exactly right. Talk to the neighbors, that's number one. And in general, the RMs are good. So sometimes there just is no ditch.
Well, it's not, I'm a counselor, and we don't have to make a ditch, we have to make a road.
Would somebody else want to share one last solution before we wrap up?
As of right now, there is no mitigation. We've been 2 years in the making with Manitoba Heritage Corp, and we tried to get some wetlands established with Ducks Unlimited, and kind of spearheaded the projects with them to get the 3-to-1 to get one of our class 1s removed so that we could proceed with our tile drainage project. Have not heard back from either organization since May of 24. And it's frustrating, and I've quite frankly lost interest in the project because of those hurdles. And I don't know if KAP can lobby to get another organization to mitigate, or whether the watershed districts could be in charge of that, but it seems like these non-for-profit organizations lack funding, and just it's going nowhere. So really your only option, if you have a wetland you want to drain, is to buy that land back twice.
Okay, and so Frank, maybe we'll go to you with the last word before we wrap this up. If you had an ask or something that you'd like to see KAP do on this, what would it be?
Just do what Jill said, solve all the drainage problems.
If you can't do what Jill, if Jill can't wave her wand and fix drainage for everybody, what's your second option?
Yeah, I just wish that the policies we had would be more science-based and more updated. So I think if KAP could attack that, that means my parking's out. Yeah, we need to, so when I go to the government or the minister, I'm often told, usually quite frankly, your voice doesn't mean very much because you're one person. And so I'm not a landowner, and I'm not an industry rep, because we're not organized either. So all I am is an interested person that wants to tile, and that voice is not very loud. So if KAP would help change the policies, that they'd be more consistent, more accountable to people enforcing them, And yeah, let's make the policies more science-based so that we can actually do what we know we can do. We can grow the economy and preserve the environment both with better drainage.
Great. So appreciate everybody taking part in this discussion and the thoughts and feedback. Again, leave your sheets on your tables. We'll pick them up. There's a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and talk about digital agriculture. Thank you.